He was about 6 feet tall, that he was completely scourged all over his body. He was crucified, and nobody dies for a lie.
The Passion of the Christ was not just another movie. It was the first and only time anyone had recreated with absolute authenticity what happened on Golgotha over 2,000 years ago. Christ's sacrifice for all of us. But that production was anything but normal. Something deeply unsettling unfolded behind the scenes. Supernatural events, strange presences, conversions, impossible coincidences. On that set, the line between performance and faith was shattered. Suffering became real. Soon, the people working on that film set realized this wasn't just a movie about Jesus. It was a supernatural experience that was transforming the lives of everyone involved. What are the odds that, on a movie set, lightning would strike the lead actor, and that it would strike twice in the exact same spot? And that during filming, not one, but 10 accidents would occur. What happened during the filming of The Passion of the Christ remains to this day one of cinema's greatest mysteries. Hollywood rejected the film, but the impossible happened. A movie spoken in Aramaic, Hebrew, and Latin, with no Hollywood stars, no publicity, and no studio backing, became a worldwide phenomenon. Millions of believers around the world mobilized. It was a spiritual experience that transcended the screen. The Passion of the Christ became the highest-grossing non-English language film in history. But after its release, success became a curse. The industry and the media pushed Mel Gibson into his darkest hour. Stay until the end, because the story isn't over. 20 years later, the man who defied Hollywood is coming back, and he returns with a promise to reveal what happened between the cross and the dawn. The sequel, The Resurrection of Christ. By the late 90s, Mel Gibson seemed to have it all. He was the hero of Braveheart, the perfect face of an industry that considered him untouchable. But behind the cameras, his life was falling apart. His marriage was crumbling, and alcohol was consuming him. In later interviews, he confessed that he felt empty, lost, without purpose. He even went so far as to say,
I didn't want to live. I saw myself destroying everything around me.
Gibson was trapped in a whirlwind of fame and guilt. But in the midst of that darkness, something happened that he himself would describe as divine intervention. One night, overwhelmed by the weight of his life, he fell to his knees, broken and desperate, and he began to pray like he hadn't done in years. Gibson had been raised in a deeply Catholic and traditional family. His father, Hutton Gibson, was a man of strict faith, but Mel had abandoned all of that years ago. But that dark night, he opened a Bible and something inside him awakened. He began to read the Bible every day. He became obsessed with the Gospels, especially the chapters about the Passion and Crucifixion. And in those pages, he found something he hadn't felt in years: purpose. Years later, he would confess,
I was a terrible man. My sins were the first to nail Christ to the cross.
That phrase would mark the beginning of everything. Mel Gibson no longer wanted to act. He wanted redemption, and he understood the only way to achieve it was by telling the story that had shaken him to his core. The story of Jesus' sacrifice. No embellishments, no filters, exactly as it happened, with all its rawness and pain. That's how the idea for The Passion of the Christ was born. It didn't emerge as a Hollywood project, but as a personal vow, a redemption. Gibson began studying every detail of the Passion, the Stations of the Cross, the Gospels, and the mystical writings of Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich, whose visions described Christ's passion with chilling intensity. Emmerich never left Germany, yet she described places in the Holy Land with a precision that archaeologists would confirm decades later. Gibson had an obsession. He wanted viewers to feel Christ's suffering as if they were witnessing it firsthand. He didn't want people to watch the Passion. He wanted them to feel it, not as some distant story, but in their own flesh. So he decided on something unthinkable. The film would be in Aramaic, Hebrew, and Latin, the languages Christ actually spoke, not a single word in English. And there would be no Hollywood stars. He decided there couldn't be any recognizable faces. It was insanity. No producer in their right mind would have backed a film like this. Who would finance a movie in dead languages, with no English dialogue and zero commercial appeal? When Gibson pitched his idea to the major studios, the response was immediate and unanimous. No. Some told him straight up it would be the biggest flop ever made. Gibson later recalled that no one in Hollywood was willing to finance even a single dollar of the project. He said,
"They asked me to tone down the violence, change the language, add some hope at the end. But if I gave in on that, it wouldn't be Christ's story anymore."
This was the breaking point. Gibson realized that if he wanted to tell this story, he would have to do it completely alone. And so, he made one of the riskiest decisions in film history. He decided to finance the movie with his own money. He sold properties, invested everything he had, and poured nearly $45 million of his personal dollars into producing The Passion of the Christ. No studio backing, no distributor, no guarantees. If the movie failed, he would lose everything. But Gibson wasn't chasing success. He was chasing redemption. He later confessed,
"It wasn't a movie I wanted to make. It was a movie I had to make."
That decision isolated him from Hollywood, but connected him to something he thought was lost, his faith. And that step, taken alone and against all odds, wouldn't just change his life. It would forever change the history of religious cinema. When Mel Gibson decided he would make The Passion of the Christ, one question tormented him: who could possibly portray the Son of God? Gibson knew this role wouldn't be just another performance. It wasn't about memorizing lines or acting out emotions. It was about embodying the pain, the surrender, and the sacrifice of a being who changed the course of history. Gibson wasn't looking for an actor. He was looking for someone willing to suffer, and few in Hollywood were prepared or willing to endure such tremendous physical demands. For months, he turned down famous names. He didn't want recognizable faces or celebrities who would distract from the message. He wanted the audience to see not an actor, but Jesus. And then a name emerged: Jim Caviezel. He was a Catholic actor, young, reserved, with a serene yet intense gaze. He had starred in The Thin Red Line and Angel Eyes, and though his career was on the rise, he wasn't a known star. Gibson invited him to his home in Malibu. The meeting was supposed to last a few minutes, but went on for 3 hours. They talked about faith, about darkness, about sacrifice, and the weight of history. But Gibson gave him a warning. "If you take this role, you might never work in Hollywood again." There was silence. Then Caviezel responded, "Each of us has our own cross to bear. We either carry it or we're crushed beneath its weight." It was at that moment when something strange happened. While going over the final details, Jim mentioned he had just turned 33, the traditional age of Christ at his crucifixion. Mel stopped and stared at him, with a mix of surprise and wonder. Then Jim added, "And my initials are JC." Mel froze, then muttered, "You're freaking me out." That moment became a sign. It wasn't a coincidence, at least not for them. It was as if something greater was behind this choice, guiding the process, pushing them both toward a story that wasn't just about making a movie. From that moment on, the commitment was absolute. Caviezel prepared himself spiritually. He prayed before every scene, attended daily mass, and spent hours meditating on the Gospels. But his preparation wasn't just spiritual. He knew his body had to become a canvas for pain. He underwent brutal physical training, but what he was about to endure during filming would surpass anything he had imagined. During the filming of The Passion of the Christ, impossible things began to happen. There was something strange in the air on that set. No one could explain it precisely, but everyone felt it. Sometimes it was a sudden silence, other times a gust of wind that whipped across the set without warning. Gibson chose the cold lands of Matera in Italy to shoot the film. The place isn't known for extreme weather, but during filming, it became strangely unpredictable. Suddenly, sunny mornings would turn into dark skies in a matter of minutes. A scene could begin under a calm sky, and out of nowhere, wind gusts would appear so strong they ripped tents from the ground and knocked over equipment. At first it was taken as a weather challenge, but something happened that changed everything, and it began to be perceived as a warning. While filming a scene from the Sermon on the Mount, Jim Caviezel climbed a hill with his heart on fire. But suddenly, the weather changed. The crew had gone up into the hills of Matera in southern Italy to film one of the most hopeful scenes in the entire movie, the Sermon on the Mount. The air smelled of wet earth and a gentle wind was blowing. Jim Caviezel was getting ready to climb the hill. Around him, technicians were checking microphones and cameras. But suddenly, the weather shifted. Within seconds, the air grew thick and clouds gathered overhead. He later recounted that for a moment, a chill ran down his spine. He felt something was about to happen, and then a white light tore through the sky. A bolt struck him directly, passing through him from head to toe. The light split the heavens and engulfed him completely. The blast was deafening. Cameras shut down. Technicians screamed. For an instant, everything hung suspended in supernatural silence. From a distance, Mel Gibson witnessed the scene. Jim Caviezel standing there, completely wrapped in light, his hair sparking. He had survived. Then the assistant director, Gian Michelini, rushed uphill to help him. But just as he reached his side, another bolt of lightning struck the exact same spot. 2 strikes in the same place in less than a minute. Both men were thrown to the ground by the shockwave. The crew stood frozen, staring at the sky in silence. The odds of this happening were virtually zero. Some were crying, others praying. The paramedics quickly rushed toward them, but both men were alive. They didn't even have burns or visible injuries, just dazed with slightly singed clothing and the smell of ozone hanging in the air. The paramedics couldn't believe it. They'd never seen anyone survive a lightning strike like that. From that day forward, something changed on set. No one spoke openly about it, but everyone whispered. What were the chances this was just coincidence? Some said it was a warning, others called it a blessing, but everyone agreed on one thing. After that day, filming was different. Every workday began with a prayer. The technicians, many of them non-believers, crossed themselves before turning on the cameras. Even the weather seemed to respond to the story. When they shot scenes of suffering, the sky would cloud over. When they filmed moments of forgiveness, the sunlight would return. But the mystery was just beginning. The time came to film the scourging. Gibson wanted it captured with brutal realism. He wanted the audience to feel the weight of sin upon the flesh. To protect Caviezel, the crew had placed a thick wooden board behind his back. But in the rawness of the scene, the angle of one strike went wrong. One of the actors playing a Roman soldier swung the whip too hard. The metal tip flew through the air and embedded itself directly into Caviezel's back. The scream from Caviezel heard in the film wasn't acting. It was real pain.
I couldn't breathe. The pain was so intense that my body went into shock. I thought it would only happen once, but it happened again.
The second time, the blow tore open his flesh in a line over 12 inches long. That scar remains on his body today, and that moment was captured in the final cut, immortalized in the most heart-wrenching scene of the entire film. But the pain didn't end there. The ultimate test was yet to come. The day arrived to film The Way of the Cross. Gibson insisted on using a real cross, made of solid wood, weighing over 150 pounds. Caviezel had to carry it under the scorching sun, fall and get back up, over and over again. During one of the takes, in a fall, the plan was for a soldier to hold the beam so it wouldn't crush him, but the soldier missed. The cross collapsed and fell with its full weight onto Caviezel's head.
It crushed my head like a melon. Some of the blood was fake, but some was mine.
But that wasn't all. The cross had dislocated his shoulder. The pain was unbearable. The crew rushed to help him, but Caviezel refused to stop. He wanted that fall to be captured on film. He wanted the world to see, for just a moment, what it means to fall with the cross upon your body. And Gibson understood. He didn't stop the camera. During the following minutes, the actor kept walking with his shoulder out of place. Every movement was real. Every scream was genuine. His contorted face, the tears and moans that erupted from him were no longer pretend. It was pure pain, transformed into prayer. The doctors examined him after the scene ended. They confirmed the dislocation. They offered him a few days of rest, but Caviezel refused. He returned to the set the next day, still with his arms swollen and his shoulder numb. Mel Gibson confessed years later that the scene was never reshot. What you see in the final cut, with the body falling and the cross hitting the ground, is exactly what happened. In the end, the line between acting and reality had been completely erased. The actor's physical pain merged with the spiritual sacrifice of the character he was portraying. The Passion was no longer just a movie, it was a penance. From that moment on, Jim Caviezel's body began to fail. Filming continued, but the cold was increasingly merciless. The final crucifixion scenes, the shots of Calvary, the body suspended between heaven and earth, were filmed in winter. The actor hung from the cross for hours, motionless, wearing only a thin tunic, drenched by rain and battered by gusts of icy wind. The crew tried to keep him warm between takes, but it was useless. His body temperature began dropping dangerously. Soon, doctors confirmed the inevitable: hypothermia. His lips turned purple, his hands trembled, and his breathing grew weak. Obviously, filming had to stop. But Caviezel refused, saying, "Christ didn't come down from the cross. Neither will I." The following days became a test of endurance. The extreme strain and relentless cold soon gave him double pneumonia. His weakened body no longer responded. Each day he lost more weight, and fiction and reality began to blur in a terrifying way. Makeup artists worked 8 to 10 hours covering him with fake wounds and blood. But to save time, Caviezel started sleeping with them on. The skin on his face cracked from the cold and paint, and the prosthetics he had to wear for days caused blisters and irritation. No stunt doubles, no special effects for his pain. The suffering was real. The cameras captured everything. It was a kind of physical penance, a performance that had already crossed the boundaries of cinema. And the question hung in the air: would Mel Gibson stop filming? The crew, witnessing the actor's torment, begged him to stop. But Gibson, with a calm voice, replied, "If he can endure it, so can we." They both knew what they were doing. They weren't seeking spectacle. They were seeking truth, a truth so profound it could only be conveyed through sacrifice. During the crucifixion, Gibson ordered the cameras to keep rolling even as the actor suffered spasms from the cold. Neither wanted to soften it. There were no cuts to hide the suffering, no alternative shots to make it less shocking. Gibson refused to edit out the hardest parts. Caviezel, even with fever and his shoulder bandaged, insisted on finishing every scene. Every tear, every spasm from the cold was real. After everything that had happened, the lightning strikes, the scourging, the dislocated shoulder, the hypothermia, something shifted in the atmosphere on set. It wasn't fear or exhaustion, it was presence, a profound sensation, as if every stone, every breath of wind, and every shadow was watching. No one could explain it, but everyone felt it. During the most agonizing scenes, silence would overtake the set. Not a cough, not a whisper, only the sound of wind and occasionally the muffled weeping of someone who couldn't bear to watch anymore. Several crew members confessed they couldn't tell where the acting ended and faith began. Some actors would retreat to cry between takes. Others, without knowing why, began to pray. Mel Gibson himself was often seen walking away from the set, eyes reddened, murmuring prayers. The makeup artists, exhausted from endless workdays, admitted feeling a strange calm in the midst of chaos. There were also those who claimed the cameras captured lights that didn't come from the stage lights, brief flashes that appeared and vanished without any technical explanation. The lead cameraman swore that at one moment, while focusing on Caviezel's face on the cross, he saw a glowing figure move behind him, a white shadow that crossed through the scene and vanished. But when they reviewed the footage, nothing was there. Then rumors began spreading among the technicians and assistants. Some claimed to have seen men dressed in white, walking between the cameras, watching, giving directions on how to position the lighting or angle a scene. They had a calm demeanor, a profound gaze, and a silent authority. They gave precise advice, then disappeared. And when the crew tried to find out who they were, no one recognized them. They weren't on any records. Nobody had hired them. Yet everyone who saw them agreed on the same thing. By the time filming ended, the rumor had become almost legend. Several crew members insisted that when reviewing photos from the set, these men didn't appear in any shot. Not in the videos, not in the behind-the-scenes footage, not even on the studio's security cameras. Gibson said later,
"There were things no one can explain, but everything happened exactly as it was meant to."
The atmosphere became so intense that for many, the filming transformed into a kind of spiritual retreat. Some of the extras, who had arrived as simple background actors, asked to confess or be baptized before production ended. And some of the main actors converted during filming. One of them was Luca Lionello, the actor who played Judas Iscariot. Until then, he had declared himself an atheist. and quite cynical about faith, but after living through those weeks on set, he confessed that he had converted to Christianity. After filming the movie, he was received into the Catholic Church and was baptized along with his family. He later confessed, "I was a non-believer. I participated in the Passion as an actor, but when it ended, I couldn't stop thinking about the figure of Jesus. Playing Judas made me understand God's love and forgiveness. The film changed my life. I found faith and received baptism." And he wasn't the only one. Pietro Cerubi was the Italian actor who played Barabbas, the criminal who is released instead of Jesus. It was a brief role, almost without dialogue, but full of symbolism. Barabbas represents the guilty man who is set free while the innocent one dies. And it was in that gaze precisely where the miracle occurred. During the filming of the scene before Pilate, Cerubi was supposed to exchange glances with Jim Caviezel while the crowd shouted, "Crucify him!" Nothing more, just a look. But when he did, something pierced through him. He would later confess in an interview, "When I looked into Caviezel's eyes," he recounted, "I didn't see an actor. I saw a depth that wasn't human. I felt Jesus looking at me and forgiving me." That experience transformed him. For weeks, he couldn't sleep. He couldn't stop thinking about that gaze. After filming Wrapped, he embraced faith, was baptized, began giving talks, and years later wrote a book titled From Barabbas to Jesus, chronicling his conversion journey. But there were more surprises among the cast. Amid the set lights and the murmur of prayers, one woman kept a secret. Maya Morgenstern, the actress playing Mary, the mother of Jesus, was pregnant. No one knew, not the crew, not the makeup artists, not even Mel Gibson. She later confessed that her condition gave her something that can't be faked, a special radiance, an inner presence that seeped into every gesture, and those who looked at her could feel it. One of the reasons Mel Gibson chose her was actually her surname. Morgenstern means morning star in German. It was a sign. This was also one of the ancient titles for the Virgin Mary, the morning star, the one who announces light in the midst of darkness. But in stark contrast to Maya's sweetness, Rosalinda Celentano took on the most disturbing and dangerous role. Of all the scenes filmed in The Passion of the Christ, there's one shrouded in mystery. Jesus, bent under the Roman lashes, bleeds while the crowd screams for his condemnation. And in the midst of chaos, the camera lingers on a figure moving slowly through the men, a woman dressed in black, her face cold, her eyes fixed, carrying a baby in her arms. But this child is not human. It has an aged face, grayish skin, and a gaze so unsettling it seems to mock the Savior's pain. Mel Gibson chose Rosalinda Celentano to embody Satan because he wanted an androgynous, ambiguous face, neither male nor female, a figure that would unsettle the viewer. They shaved Rosalinda's eyebrows, filmed her in slow motion to prevent her from blinking, and overlaid a man's voice over hers. She lost weight and followed a strict diet of rice and beans. Her beauty became uncomfortable, unreal, a reflection of something that appears divine but is corrupted. In the scene, she was holding a baby, but there was something disturbing about it. The baby looked like an aged man with hair on its back. It was a metaphor for corrupted love, the perversion of what should be sacred. Gibson placed that scene at the cruelest moment of torment, right when the soldiers turn Jesus' body to whip him from the front. The pain reaches its peak, and at that moment, Satan appears incarnated as a mother, holding a deformed life, the dark mirror of Mary and her son. It was hell celebrating heaven's supposed defeat. Rosalinda confessed years later that filming that scene left her emotionally devastated. She said she spent weeks alone, in silence, emotionally preparing herself to film it. But when the moment came, she felt there was something real in that evil, that she felt a dark presence. She said that during filming, the air felt heavy, as if the atmosphere became unreal. This role changed her life so much that after the film, she left cinema for a while and dedicated herself to painting. On the other hand, the actor playing Jesus Christ, Jim Caviezel, seemed to have entered a different state. Many said he was no longer acting, that he had become an extension of the character. His gaze had changed. He barely spoke between takes, and when he did, his voice was almost a whisper. Some remembered seeing him staring at the sky, as if waiting for an answer. When they finally rolled the last scene, the resurrection, the atmosphere filled with anticipation. The cold was still there, but something in the air had transformed. Many wept when they saw the light entering the tomb's cave. Others stood motionless, unable to explain what they felt. And so, when Gibson shouted "Final cut," the echo of those words didn't sound like the end of a movie. It sounded like a liberation. Many knew they had witnessed something that went beyond. And as they dismantled the crosses under Matera's grey sky, many couldn't help but think the same thing. Because on that set, many felt that God had passed through there. Mel Gibson returned to Los Angeles with his heart on fire. He had bet everything, his reputation, his fortune, and his career. But no one in Hollywood would promote his film. They told him it was too violent, too religious, too risky, but he didn't give in. He financed the distribution himself with $15 million, screening it in churches, schools, and parish halls. He let word spread from mouth to mouth like a calling. Meanwhile, the big studios laughed and joked about it. But what they didn't know was that he was about to ignite a flame that would sweep across the world. On February 25, 2004, Ash Wednesday, The Passion of the Christ premiered in theaters. And what happened was historic. There was no red carpet or massive campaigns, but even so, from day one, the lines stretched for entire blocks. They looked like pilgrimages, people with rosaries, thick silence, prayers whispered under their breath. The entire Christian community mobilized. Churches organized caravans to see the film. Parishes bought tickets for whole communities and sold out showings. What began as one man's personal obsession became a collective act of faith. In many cities, the screenings turned into spontaneous liturgies. Priests celebrated masses or moments of prayer inside the theaters, and viewers left crying in silence as if they had just witnessed a spiritual awakening. There were fainting spells, dizzy episodes, and viewers who couldn't bear the flogging scenes. In Kansas, there was a case that made headlines around the world. A 56-year-old woman died of a heart attack during the crucifixion scene on the very day of the premiere. Spontaneous conversions and prayers broke out right in the theater halls. In Brazil, Mexico, Poland, the Philippines, movie theaters transformed into temples. Churches overflowed and pastors began preaching about the film, and the impossible happened. The Passion of the Christ became the highest-grossing non-English film in history. The numbers seemed unreal. It earned over $610 million worldwide and more than $370.8 million in the United States, more than any blockbuster that year. A work spoken in Aramaic, Hebrew, and Latin, with no Hollywood stars, no advertising campaign, and no studio backing, had become a global phenomenon. For 2 decades, it remained the highest-grossing R-rated film at the domestic box office. Its success proved there was a massive Christian audience ignored by the industry. The major studios that had rejected the film as too religious, too violent, and lacking commercial potential now watched their own movies being ignored, because the entire world only wanted to see Jesus. Mel Gibson had gambled everything he had, without a single studio backing him, and against all odds, he had won. But that triumph, instead of opening the doors to cinematic paradise, became his descent into media hell. Then a ruthless campaign began against Gibson and the film. Hollywood critics tore him apart. They accused him of anti-Semitism, fanaticism, and glorifying violence. The major media outlets launched an open war against him. The New York Times wrote that his film resurrected medieval prejudices. The Guardian described it as torture porn. Some called him a religious fanatic, others a guilt-mongering propagandist. Accusations of anti-Semitism filled the headlines. Journalists and academics debated whether Gibson had blamed the Jewish people for Christ's death. Reporters accused him of inciting hatred. Some demanded it be censored, others wanted it analyzed. But while critics argued, audiences kept filling the theaters. Years later, in various interviews, Gibson explained why he chose to show the pain unfiltered.
Christ's suffering wasn't symbolic. It was real. I didn't want a pretty version, or poetic, or theatrical. I wanted the viewer to feel the weight of sin upon one man's body.
I have a belief in something greater than me, because if it's me, we're all in trouble.
Every single one of those guys died rather than deny their belief.
He said that during filming, every attempt to soften the scenes felt fake.
When it came to cutting a moment, something inside me said, don't do it, because in that instant the pain wasn't just Christ, it belonged to all of us.
Gibson defended that he didn't film the violence for shock value, but out of reverence.
Sometimes the truth hurts, but if Christ endured that out of love, the least I could do was not hide it.
Regarding the accusations of anti-Semitism, he responded calmly,
Jesus was Jewish. His mother was Jewish. His apostles were Jewish. How could I hate his own people? I didn't film hatred, I filmed redemption.
and about the industry's reaction, he was more forceful.
Hollywood didn't want this film to exist, not because they didn't understand the message, but because they understood it all too well.
Years later, when asked if it was worth it, Mel Gibson answered without hesitation,
Yes, I'd do it again, exactly the same way, because I saw what it stirred in people. I saw hearts change, and that, in this world, is worth more than all the awards.
In a later interview, he confessed,
After the premiere, I felt like all hell was coming down on me. It was as if something invisible had declared war on me.
Yet after the film's release and the merciless attacks against him, Gibson withdrew from everything. For months he avoided interviews. His public appearances were reduced to just a few words. And while millions talked about the movie, he sank into an ever-deepening silence. He began to isolate himself. The pressure made him irritable, paranoid, vulnerable. The faith that had sustained him during filming now seemed to be testing him. And in his personal life, chaos erupted. The old shadows, alcohol, anger, guilt, came roaring back. His addictions, which he'd kept under control for years, took hold of his life again. The paparazzi followed him, waiting for him to fall, and the fall came. 2 years after the premiere, in 2006, Mel Gibson was arrested one night in Malibu under the influence of alcohol. And in a fit of rage, he shouted anti-Semitic slurs that would echo around the world. It took mere seconds to destroy decades of work. Those words would become his media death sentence. Photos of his handcuffed face circled the globe. The press tore him apart and Hollywood completely cancelled him. That incident was rock bottom. He would say it himself years later.
It wasn't a stumble, it was a public execution.
The man who had directed Braveheart and won the Oscar suddenly became an outcast in his own industry. His friends vanished, and so did he. In later interviews, he confessed he had contemplated death. He felt betrayed, humiliated, lost.
After the Passion, everything went dark. It was as if I had awakened demons I didn't know existed.
For years, he gave no interviews, didn't work, didn't appear at ceremonies or events. His family fell apart. He lived in isolation, facing lawsuits, rehab treatments, and a profound struggle with guilt and faith. But in the midst of that darkness, Mel Gibson found a new purpose, the sequel to The Passion of the Christ. We'll talk about that in a moment, but first, we need to find out what happened to Jim Caviezel, the actor who played Jesus Christ. In the early 2000s, Jim Caviezel was the face Hollywood had been waiting for. Tall, charismatic, with a calm voice and intense gaze, the studios saw him as the perfect blend of Gregory Peck's spirituality and Tom Cruise's magnetism. He had just shined in films like The Thin Red Line, Frequency, and The Count of Monte Cristo, proving he could carry a blockbuster on his own. Magazines crowned him as one of the 5 most promising actors of his generation. Major directors wanted him for their upcoming projects. His future seemed secure. But after The Passion of the Christ premiered, the phone stopped ringing, scripts stopped coming, and projects vanished. The film made him world famous. His face, covered in blood and dust, became an icon, but he became an uncomfortable figure. During a 2011 conference, Caviezel confirmed it calmly.
They told me my career was over, and the worst part is, they were right. But if I had to do it again, I'd do it without hesitation.
The studios refused to hire the Catholic Jesus. Caviezel was branded a fanatic, unmanageable, problematic. For years, he lived practically without work, surviving on minor roles in small productions and quiet TV appearances. Instead of denouncing the role that condemned him, he chose to live it. He began traveling the world giving talks about faith, suffering, and hope. The blacklisting was complete. His agent dropped him. The media mocked his religious statements and social media harassed him. He even received threats and hateful messages for his Christian stance. But Caviezel stood firm. He found refuge in his family and his faith. With his wife, he adopted 3 disabled children from China and raised them away from the spotlight. For years, rumors circulated that he'd been placed on an industry blacklist. In a later interview, Caviezel put it bluntly,
I went from being one of the most sought-after actors to not getting a single call. I did nothing wrong. I just played Jesus.
But far from backing down, his faith only grew stronger. He began giving lectures, speaking in churches, and appearing in Christian-themed films. Caviezel devoted himself to volunteer work, visiting prisons and hospitals, and sharing his testimony at spiritual retreats. Then, in 2011, something shifted. After nearly a decade in the shadows, Caviezel received an unexpected call, a new opportunity. He was cast as the lead in the series Person of Interest, and it ran for 5 seasons. But the true resurrection came almost 20 years later. In 2023, he starred in Sound of Freedom, an independent film based on the true story of a former U.S. agent fighting against child trafficking. Major studios refused to distribute it, but Christian communities shared it. Social media made it go viral, and the story became a quiet revolution. Within months, Sound of Freedom became a worldwide phenomenon, grossing over $250 million and even surpassing blockbusters from Disney and Warner. Caviezel returned to the headlines the same way, with a project rejected by Hollywood that, against all odds, became a massive success. When asked how he felt, he replied,
God gave me another chance. When the world shut its doors on me, he opened a much bigger one.
But while the world was rediscovering Caviezel, Mel Gibson was also rising again. After years of silence, isolation, and internal battles, his gaze returned to the very place where it all began, the empty tomb. Because Gibson never saw the Passion as an ending, he always conceived it as the first part of a much larger story, a story that doesn't end at the cross, but in victory over death. The project is called The Resurrection of Christ, and it's not just a simple sequel, it's the second part of a work that Gibson never considered finished. For years, he wrote in secret, alongside his brother Donald and Braveheart screenwriter Randall Wallace, a script he himself described as an otherworldly experience, something no eye has ever seen on film. And in a recent interview, Mel defined it with a haunting phrase.
It will be like a mystical journey, a descent, and then an ascension.
Because the resurrection of Christ won't just show Jesus' victory over death. They don't want to limit themselves to depicting the moment of resurrection, but to explore what happened between death and dawn, what really occurred between Friday and Sunday, while Christ's body lay in the tomb. The plot will span from the hours following the crucifixion to the appearances of the risen Christ. But Gibson revealed it will also include something never before shown on film: Christ's descent into Hades, when the Redeemer breaks down the gates of hell to free the souls awaiting the promise, a vision inspired by apocryphal texts, patristic writings, and fragments from the Gospel of Peter. There, the Son of God confronts the power of death and claims his ultimate victory, not as a symbolic tale, but as a cosmic experience between heaven and the abyss. Gibson has described the film's tone as a blend of spiritual terror, absolute hope, and divine glory. He's not seeking to recreate the violence of the first film, but to reflect the invisible power of redemption. Where the Passion showed the broken body, the resurrection will show the victorious soul. His goal isn't to retell the story, but to descend into the deepest depths of the mystery that changed the world forever. The Third Day. Gibson has said he doesn't want to make a religious movie, but a spiritual experience, something that confronts viewers with their own faith, just as the first confronted them with their guilt. In an interview with Stephen Colbert, Gibson stated,
This will be the greatest event in human history. We all know suffering, but few understand the magnitude of what happened after the cross. Christ didn't just rise from the dead. He conquered the realm of death itself.
The project has been shrouded in absolute secrecy, but Jim Caviezel revealed,
This will be the biggest film in history, 5 times more epic than The Passion.
Filming, which Gibson planned to begin after the pandemic, has been delayed multiple times due to his extreme perfectionism. He has revisited the locations where he filmed The Passion in Matera, Italy, to reconstruct first-century Jerusalem with even greater realism. He has also worked with theologians, historians, and biblical scholars to faithfully depict the chronology between the crucifixion and the resurrection. The film will show the apostles' bewilderment, Mary's silence, the Roman guards' confusion, the darkness in the spiritual realm, and finally, the eruption of light that never goes out again. Gibson himself describes it as a journey between the horror of death and the explosion of eternal dawn. But Gibson is keeping another secret. At a private conference in 2023, he claimed that the resurrection will contain a sequence no one will ever forget, a vision of the afterlife inspired by the Book of Revelation and the Messianic Psalms. The film will be released in 2 parts, separated by a symbol, the time Christ remained on earth after his resurrection. Part 1 will premiere on March 26, 2027, Good Friday, and Part 2 will premiere 40 days later on May 6th of the same year, Ascension Day. Exactly 40 days. 40 days between the empty tomb and the return to the Father. Nothing about the timing is accidental. Gibson insists the calendar was chosen through faith, not strategy. He wants the experience to be lived as a liturgy, not as a saga. For years, rumors claimed that Jim Caviezel would reprise his role as Jesus. He even confirmed it himself in interviews. But in 2025, Mel Gibson made an unexpected decision. He would not bring back the original cast. According to Gibson, the reason was artistic, but also symbolic, because each generation must see the face of Christ with new eyes. The lead role will now go to Finnish actor Jaakko Otonen, joined by Mariella Garriga as Mary Magdalene, Kasia Smutniak as the Virgin Mary, Pierluigi Pacino as Peter, and Riccardo Scamaccio as Pontius Pilate. The budget exceeds $100 million, more than double that of The Passion of the Christ. But what's truly daunting isn't the money, it's the theological and visual challenge, depicting the afterlife. His team is working with theologians, historians, and visual artists to portray the spiritual dimension between death and resurrection, the realms where darkness attempts to hold back the light, and where Christ breaks the chains of damnation. The producers say Gibson wants to blend elements from apocryphal tradition with biblical exegesis, and that the film will explore the moment when the Messiah's soul descends into hell to free the righteous. Mel Gibson has explained that he's not looking to provoke, but to reveal. He wants audiences to understand that the resurrection isn't a happy ending, but the beginning of an invisible war. That's why, in the director's own words,
The Passion was about suffering. The resurrection will be about power.
the film's tone will be different. Less blood, but more mystery. Less visible pain, but more spiritual warfare. An exploration of heaven and hell, of time and eternity. Gibson has said he's not trying to compete with Hollywood, but to answer it. While the industry pours millions into fictional heroes, he wants to tell the story of the only one who conquered death. And he'll do it with the same faith that led him to finance The Passion of the Christ when no one believed in it.
I don't want to show how Christ came back to life. I want to show why he did. Not for himself, but for us.
In one of his recent statements, Gibson summed up his purpose in a single sentence.
The Passion showed how much Christ loved us. The resurrection will show how far that love went.
It's worth remembering that after the Passion of the Christ's worldwide success, Hollywood turned its attention to an audience it had previously ignored: believers. They conducted surveys and discovered something surprising. The polls revealed that 10% of viewers admitted to changing some aspect of their beliefs or religious practices after watching it, and that 18% began praying more or attending church more often. This sparked a new wave of Christian films. Movies like God's Not Dead, Heaven is for Real, Letters to God, War Room, and Miracles from Heaven. But none came close to matching the original's impact. The Passion remained the untouchable benchmark. In the years that followed, Hollywood understood that faith could fill theaters, but it couldn't be manufactured in a lab. The believing audience was demanding. They didn't want sugar-coated sermons or comfortable endings. They wanted truth. That's why, although many tried to repeat the miracle, none succeeded. The film was banned in some Muslim countries and criticized in Europe for its brutality, but that only fueled the mystery. While Hollywood saw it as a commercial phenomenon, people experienced it as something supernatural. Christian theologians and psychologists have studied the phenomenon for years, and the consensus is clear. The Passion triggered a collective catharsis, an emotional and spiritual reaction so profound that it transcended cinema. Millions of people around the world have claimed that the Passion of the Christ marked a before and after in their lives. Some speak of a mystical effect, a spiritual impact that awakens the viewer's consciousness to suffering and redemption. But something else happened with this film. Hundreds of people from different countries, of different ages and languages, claimed to have experienced something impossible to explain while watching the movie. The testimonies are countless: healings, prophetic dreams, sudden conversions, family reconciliations, even spiritual deliverances. Some said they felt a presence in the theater, a sudden warmth, an unknown peace. Others felt a weight on their chest during the crucifixion, and then relief, as if something invisible had broken inside them. There were those who claimed to have cried for hours without knowing why, and those who, upon leaving the cinema, went straight to church after years of absence. In forums, books, and recorded testimonies, stories of faith are told after watching the film. A woman in Argentina claimed she partially recovered her sight after watching the movie and praying in front of the screen. A man in the Philippines said he felt that God spoke to him in the middle of the flogging scene. In Italy, a young drug addict abandoned his addiction after watching it. In Brazil, a priest shared that during a community screening, people spontaneously began confessing their sins through tears. If you also felt something while watching the film or experienced a spiritual awakening, leave your testimony below in the comments. Share what happened, what you felt, what you experienced, or what awakened within you. Because perhaps what you experienced wasn't just emotion, but a real encounter with Him. A moment when God touched something that lay dormant inside you. Thousands of people worldwide have testified that something changed after watching it. Some found comfort after years of pain. Others felt the forgiveness they had never asked for. And some simply understood they are not alone. Every testimony is a flame, and each word written here can ignite another. So share what you experienced. Because for millions of believers, the Passion transcended the screen to become a tool of faith, and faith is contagious. I invite you to subscribe to this channel, because every week we share videos that seek to awaken your faith, deepen your understanding of the Word, and reveal the hidden mysteries the Bible holds for those who still have ears to hear. But to really understand how deeply His story connects with real history, you need to watch the video that's on screen right now. In it, you'll see 10 objects Jesus touched that still exist today. If you stop at the story of the Passion, you're staying on the surface. When you see the marks He left in history, your faith becomes much more concrete. And in the times we're living in, believing without understanding is no longer an option. This is the missing piece to truly see the imprint of Jesus on the world. Click on the screen. You don't want to miss this.